Good afternoon, and welcome to our panel entitled How to Upskill Emerging Talent and Create an Engaging Work Term. My name is Rob Maciel, and I'm a regional manager on the employment relations team here at the University of Waterloo. And today I'm joined by two industry experts who will be sharing their thoughts with us. First, Kelsey Dries is a campus experience specialist at BDO Canada. She has worked with BDO in human resources and campus recruitment for the last 5 years. And secondly, Kunal Gupta, the founder and CEO of Polar, a creative advertising software company that supports media publishers globally. Welcome to you both. We're excited to have you here today and for you to share your perspectives with us on managing successful work terms. So to get started, let's start with Kunal. As an entrepreneur and a business leader, you've had to navigate recruitment, training, and development for your staff, as well as run your business. Do you have any advice for small businesses and entrepreneurs looking to develop policies, best practices, or approaches on continuing education and cross-training for your staff members?
Hey Rob, thanks for having me, and nice to meet you, Kelsey. In terms of the last couple years, the last 18 months, it's been a whirlwind for all businesses, but small businesses in particular. And any knowledge-based industry businesses, service businesses, like people are our asset. So the investment in the people is an investment in the business. That's how I have definitely seen it. Our business has grown over the years, but at different stages, especially when we're smaller in size, what I came to appreciate is the diversity of needs that everybody has on the team. And it became hard to take like a peanut butter approach to do something that would benefit everybody and support everyone's upskilling and growth. So what I've now learned is to give people space, and encourage them to set some intentions. And I use the word intentions deliberately, not goals, but intentions. So it's a little softer, it's a little more inviting, and a little more open around intentions, around how do they want to grow, what's important to them. And we ask people to reflect on that. We ask people to share that. And the thing that I am constantly surprised with is the amount of diversity. Everybody's looking for something slightly different. And as an employer, can't really give everybody one thing and they're all going to connect with it. The best thing I can do is give them space and encouragement, very light structure. And then the other thing is also leading by example. I think that's really important. Can't ask people to grow if I'm not leading by example and talking about what I'm doing for myself above and beyond the business. So those are a couple of thoughts, Rob, on that question.
Wonderful, thank you. And I really appreciate the notion that you can't have a one size fits all. And here at the university, when we look at how we're deploying things like the Future Ready Talent Framework, individual training programs or customized training programs like We Accelerate, we look at those different ways that we can help build up those skills for the students so that they are more responsive to unique employer needs. So Kelsey, moving on a little bit, how do you and your team at BDO identify the need for upskilling your emerging talent in the workplace?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me. With our team, we've always really focused on the development of our co-op students and recognize that they're not just here for maybe 4 months or 8 months. We want to make sure they're growing long term, either with the firm or in other opportunities in their career. So we've always had close-knit teams that work really collaboratively and help each other grow. But with the shift to virtual work, we wanted to make sure that that wasn't lost and that those natural opportunities that a student would have from sitting next to their manager would still translate over to a virtual environment. So we wanted to really make sure they got those opportunities, and we presented some chances for them to keep growing their skill set regardless of whether they were calling their manager or they were just working on their own that day. So our step up program allowed us to give them that first push to doing some virtual learning, adapting to a virtual workplace, developing their soft skills alongside doing their daily work in their career. So I think we've always focused on the development of our students, but trying to adapt to a new world. BDO is going to be in a hybrid environment for the foreseeable future, and we want to make sure that students really get the most value out of that, whether they're in office or working virtual. In addition, we also have 125 offices across Canada. So for us, when we looked at all the students we were bringing on, it was really important that the student in Toronto was also getting the same experience as a student in Thunder Bay. And overall, they were all learning and all growing during their work terms with us. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And again, I think that speaks to Kunal's earlier point of you have to figure out ways to accommodate the difference, and be it different skill sets, be it different time zones. How do you make sure that there's a consistent level of experience for a co-op student? And Kelsey, just as a quick follow-up, how have you found that programs like the one you're referring to are helping with retention, or are co-op students returning? Are you finding they're more responsive? What is that looking like?
Yeah, I think students have been responsive and really getting as much out of the programs and the engagement opportunities as they put into it. Some students I see throughout their work terms showing up to more events or getting involved in more opportunities. And those ones seem to not only develop their skills, but get a bit of a clearer sense for what they want to do with their career. So part of our program isn't just, teaching them soft skills or technical skills. It's also having live sessions with our leaders and panels to talk about how to make the most of your work term or how you can develop your career. So I think the upskilling that we're focused on is not just around how to do the work or how to be a good worker. It's how to make the most out of your career and where you want to take your career. So I think there's a lot of value in that. I think students that do that, I can't say exactly for retention because maybe we help them guide them into a spot that isn't PDO. But honestly, we really frame this as a beginning experience for co-ops to, direct them to the best opportunity for them in the future. So while I'd say I think it helps the students figure out where they want to be, even if that's not BDO, it kind of helps them get there and get their focus sooner rather than later. If that makes sense. So maybe not retention per se. I do think it helps with retention for the students that want to be there, but I think the program and the events that we hold and the skills that we bring for them provide them clarity. So the ones that do say no, they want to stay.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it, because then you're also helping them launch into their career and figuring out what is it they want to get out of their career, what's the type of work that they find most satisfying, and those different factors as well. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Kunal, kind of expanding on that a little bit, what value have you found in implementing upskilling programs or professional development training programs, and what value that provides to your organization?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think I want to go work at BDO and get all those benefits. I don't know if they'll take me. So I'm going to be a little contrarian here. I use co-op students to help upskill my full-time staff. And I say that seriously. So I have maybe 35 co-op students right now working for me, and they get partnered up with a mentor. They don't realize it, but they're the actual mentor. And this is why I index so heavily on co-op students. I hire so many of them, not just because I was once a co-op student a long time ago, but I see something different in co-op students that I actually don't get in full-time staff. So we're a software business. We have to keep innovating. We have to keep developing new products and services to stay relevant to our clients. We're in a highly, highly competitive, industry. And when I take a new idea to a full-time staff member, I'm saying, hey, we should do this. The response I get is, why? When I take a new idea to a co-op student, the response I get is, okay, when do you need it? So the openness to experimentation, the openness to I'm just going to jump into something I know nothing about and figure it out. Co-op students, especially from Waterloo, I'm biased, are quite intelligent and resourceful as well. So all of this brings this energy around creativity, around innovation, around experimentation. We obviously cultivate it. We allow and ask and challenge the students to work on things that are higher risk, that are bleeding edge, that haven't been done before. And our full-time staff sees new programming languages they use, new software tools they use, and majority of our revenue today comes from products that were invented by co-op students who worked for me years ago. Not from our full-time staff. So I'm constantly challenging my full-time staff to learn from how students think, to how students approach problems, and how resourceful they are and how iterative they are, how efficient they are. I mean, students are generally lazy, which is a great thing when it comes to innovation because they find the fastest way to get something done. And as a business owner, especially a small business, I want people to be as efficient as possible. So there's so much to be learned from co-op students if framed and positioned the right way. Now, what do we do for the actual students? We've invested a lot. I do believe there is a gap between what they're learning in the classroom and what they need to be effective in a workplace like ours. So we're very entrepreneurial culture. We host a monthly conference. We call it a summit for the students. I bring in a bunch of my entrepreneur friends to give talks, and they get a lot of interaction and access to people they otherwise wouldn't get access to. And that provides a lot of inspiration. We have monthly pulse checks. They're non-anonymous surveys. They get asked a whole bunch of questions. Their mentors get asked a bunch of questions. I see everything, a few of us get to see everything everybody says. We look at the trends because we have a big enough cohort to see where the issues are. So we try to correct things along the way versus waiting until the end of the co-op term, and that makes a big difference. And then we have a pretty extensive onboarding course, and that's really helpful. We call it Day One. It's we used an online learning software to create it, and we actually have the students create it before they leave. So they do it in the last week on the co-op term, they create it. And it's literally like 100 to 200 like modules that the students create, videos and tutorials and guides. So it's created by students for students, and they spend an entire week just going through that online course. And then they're productive by week 2 versus taking 4 to 5 or to 6 weeks, which is normally what it takes. So those are just a couple of things. We do a lot more actually, but those are some highlights of how students are upskilling my full-time staff, and then how we're trying to upskill the students to be effective in the co-op term.
Thank you. I really appreciate that idea of the give and take between what the co-op students can bring to your organization in that short, 4-month, 8-month work term. And it's a refreshing look. It's an outside perspective, and sometimes that can really buoy the organization. And similarly with onboarding being, as we all know from different studies, a critical portion of looking at the long-term success of an employee. It's really interesting to see how you've integrated that into their approach. So kind of expanding on that, Kelsey, what would you say have been the results of the upskilling initiatives? You spoke a little bit about it earlier, but maybe specifically how these initiatives are creating better or more engaging work terms for the co-op students.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think I spoke to a little bit of it earlier that those that have been engaged in the programs that we've provided have gotten a more consistent experience, gotten more opportunities to develop themselves. They've gotten more opportunities to hear from our leaders and think about their career development in addition to growing their soft and technical skills. But overall, I think the ones that have put the most effort and taken the most opportunities have been more engaged and being able to make more connections. For example, in the summer term of Step Up, we host a case contest. So students can form or be put on a team, and we don't give them an imaginary case. We've given them a real prompt on how they think something at BDO could be done better or done differently. So this summer's theme was technology, and we had a final panel, which included our chief digital officer at BDO to judge the ideas presented by students. So they all found really great and innovative ways to make the day-to-day processes or the learning and onboarding experience that they went through more efficient using different technologies. And I learned a lot from seeing those presentations from them. They got to collaborate with students that they may not have been working with side by side in an office. They got feedback from leaders at the firm on their presentation skills or their idea and their readiness. So I think that was a big takeaway, that those that have gotten engaged got to not only connect with different people but learn different skills and present their ideas. The winning team for that case contest had their idea put into the queue of our digital office's work to potentially be implemented. So it's a lot of you put into it, whatever you put into it, you get out of it. And those students that were the most engaged really got to make connections. And we also got to see their ideas, and they got to see their ideas being, showcased to the firm and seen as really important. Like Kamal said, they're full of life, they're full of energy, and they see things in a fresh way. They're not stuck into we do things at BDO because we've always done them this way. That's not really in BDO's values. We try and change things up as we need to and adapt, and co-op students are really great at that. So I think that's one of the main effects that some of these upskilling initiatives has had, is we're not telling them, here's what you need to learn, go learn it on your computer by yourself. It's we want you to have more organic and collaborative learning experiences throughout your work term. And we know that you're going to have good ideas from that. We want to hear them and we want to see your insight as well.
That's great. Thank you. And I think, in my experience in working in co-op and seeing, the results of hundreds of work terms, it's consistent with what you're saying, Kelsey, and the idea that the students are involved in a real world, an actual business problem that they're trying to solve for the company versus a theoretical or hypothetical case. So they get to participate in solving real problems, and it's a bit more engaging in that sense. So just a reminder, anyone in the audience watching today, that we will have some time towards the end of the panel for some questions. So if you do have questions, please submit them in the chat, and we'll be sure to get to them. So continuing along, Kunal, if you had two co-op students who you saw were learning and developing skills at different speeds or different paces, what do you do to ensure that you're giving them equal opportunities for growth?
Yeah. We have a lot of students, so we see the diversity of where different students are at. 50% of the students I hire are first-year students, which means it's not just they're young, but it's also their first time being in a workplace. 70% of the students we've hired in the last 2 years are women. 80% of the students we've hired are visible minorities or identify as visible minorities. So it's a very diverse set of backgrounds, and as a result, they've had different experiences and exposures. So students are coming at very different stages and levels, but I would say it's no different than full-time staff. It's no different than full-time staff. We've got lots of full-time staff, and they also have different experiences and skill levels. I think what's really important in leadership and management is alignment, and this idea of flow, not force. Flow means to be aligned with, okay, here's where I'm at, or here's where you're at. Let's understand, acknowledge the reality of the situation, and then identify what makes sense for that reality. What's really helpful to achieve this is to not come in with a bunch of ideas or preconceived, this is what it needs to look like, but it's to be open to what is like the reality telling me, and being open to listening to that and then responding to it, versus kind of blindly like forcing something down the pipe. I think by January, I think we're going to hit a milestone of having hired 500 students now in the last decade across my businesses. And, right now I have two businesses. One business has 20 students, the other has 15 students working for it. And I get asked, like, how or why do you hire so many students? And it's a cohort model that I've taken and a strategy I've taken. And this is the issue I see most small to mid-sized businesses take with co-ops, is they just hire one or two. And the expectation on those one or two students is so high that, to your question, Rob, if the growth isn't there or the skill isn't there, then it's a failure. And then they kind of give up on the student, and the student gives up in the co-op term. A cohort model is very different. A cohort model of 10, 15, 20 students, you're kind of guaranteed you're going to have 3 or 4 students who are actually better than full-time staff. And I say that all the time to my full-time staff, like they're better. When I was a co-op student, in some of my terms, I was set up well, I was better than the full-time staff. And that's amazing. And then you're going to have most of the cohort are going to be average. And then there's going to be 3 or 4 students who are not, it's not aligned. It's not a good fit. You're still going to keep them. You're still going to finish the term. You're going to do your best, but the contribution is going to be relatively low. And the learning and growth of the student will probably also be relatively low. But if you look at it as a cohort, that's actually okay. And the program will be a success every single term. So that's my strong advice. The costs are relatively low. The risk is low. The process is easy. The quality of talent is high. Is a cohort model guarantees success. Kind of just hiring 1 or 2 or 3 students puts a lot of pressure on everybody to make it work. and students are under enough pressure as is.
Definitely, I appreciate that, and you know, it's interesting how you're seeing that breadth in your cohorts. So, looking at our last question before we turn to the audience questions, I'm going to push this one to Kelsey. So, if you had 3 recommendations for businesses looking to upskill their teams and further engage emerging talent, what would they be?
It's a good question. I think the first one that I think I've echoed in some of my other answers is to ask your team what they need. You can look at your business strategy and you can look at, you know, a skills gap, but if you're working with, you know, smart people who are working autonomously, who understand the goals of the organization and what is involved in their job, they're going to be able to tell you where their gaps are and what they need better than anyone else. So especially with students, I think they're very intuitive and self-aware on where they need to develop, especially if given the right feedback. So ask your people, give them a clear understanding of the business vision and strategy and where it needs to go, but from there ask them what they need to help get there. The second thing I would say is also to build opportunities around people's strengths, not job descriptions. So at BDO, our performance management framework has some clear outlines of how you can make sure to meet or exceed the expectations in your role, but we also focus on people's strengths. So identifying what they're best at and, you know, not just the most efficient, but what energizes them and what they enjoy the most. And where possible, we try and tailor the work that they're doing to cater to that. So if you're catering to people's strengths, everyone's going to be happier, more engaged, more efficient at their role. And what somebody's weakness is probably somebody else's strength on your team. So sticking to job descriptions too rigidly might not allow for everyone to perform their best work. So I'd also say when upskilling, look at people's strengths. And then the final one is to build a tone of support from the top. So BDO is an organization of over 4,500 people, and our leaders are really supportive of our talent, of professional development, and especially of our students and growing them into future team members that could join us full time or for multiple co-op terms. So I think it's really important to have that support all the way throughout your organization, because there is an ask of our managers and our other team members to spend their time when we're all very busy to train others or to support others. So if you don't have the emphasis that that's an extremely important and necessary thing to do for the future of our team and for the overall organization, then upskilling initiatives are going to fall flat if everyone's not bought in, and that starts from your leaders knowing that that's important and knowing why it's important. So yeah, those would be my big 3.
Perfect. Thanks so much. And recognizing we only have a couple minutes left, I want to try and get to a few of these audience questions. So, Kunal, I'll push this one to you first. Is what type of employees do you think need or require the most upskilling, and how are you helping them be more prepared for the future of work?
So 2 answers. The first are the employees that put their hand up when asked. And the second are the employees that don't put their hand up when asked. So that's like an awareness or lack of awareness piece. So I think it's a smart strategy to put the feelers out there, surveys, reflections, questions, however you do it, to let people self-identify. And then second, to allow managers to identify, okay, these are people that are showing some weakness in these areas. The hardest thing is when people are not self-aware around where they have skill gaps or experience gaps. So if they're not self-aware, then they're not going to be taking the steps to address those gaps. And there's no reason to be shy. There's nothing wrong with helping people when they're not aware, to help make them aware and then provide the support.
Perfect. Thank you. And our next question, Kelsey, this is to you, and I think it speaks to some of the challenges of working in a larger organization. So Kelsey, was your senior leadership supportive of implementing an upskilling program, and interested to understand what tactics you used to get them on board?
Yeah, absolutely. This may not be an exciting answer, but yes, they're very supportive. The ask to have a more robust structured learning program and upskilling program at BDO came from our leadership team. So for context, we hire over 800 students off campus each year. It's maybe on average about 500 co-ops and 300 new grads, and our leaders really recognize the value of that early talent and growing them into our future leaders. So I don't have much advice on getting them on board because they came to us to say, hey, we need to make sure that we're supporting these students and helping them grow and staying competitive in the market as well, to let students know that the opportunities they're going to get at BDO are going to be the best that they have available to them, at least within the accounting and finance sphere. So I think, if you're struggling to get leaders on board, you can show them comparators. You can say what would the cost be if we didn't do this. But I was very lucky that our leaders are very engaged in our early talent initiatives, so it was an ask from them for us specifically.
Yeah, I think you're right. That certainly helps when the directive comes from the top, and you already have that buy-in and support. To make sure you can actually deploy and see those programs all the way through. So our last question here before we wrap up, Kunal, I'll go to you first. Are there upskilling programs you would like to implement within the organization in the future? And if so, what are they?
So we started something about just over a year ago, called the Someday Experiment. And the idea was really simple. The week has 7 days in them. None of them are called someday. So all the things I say to myself, someday I will, ... someday doesn't exist. So those things will never happen. So we renamed Fridays to Sundays. And we said, today, every Friday is your Sunday. You do whatever you want to do with this day. Could be professional, could be personal. So we essentially moved to our own version of a 4-day work week, but with the strong communication that we're not just giving everybody a 3-day weekend. We're carving out a day for you to do what you said you wanted to always do someday. And we have reflections that people share. We have a sharing platform. They can talk about what they've done on their someday projects. So this goes back to the first thing I shared at the start of our conversation, which is giving people space. If you've hired well, then people will know what they need to grow. If you've hired well, people will be self-aware, and giving them the space, I think, is the best thing that you can do. And it's been phenomenal for us, 14 months into it.
That's great. I love that idea. And recognizing we're just about out of time, Kelsey, was there any comments that you wanted to make on that one?
Yeah, I think all the comments that were made around giving people space to do what's best for them really resonates. For us specifically, I think in the future we'd like to see a couple more structured programs specifically around upskilling when onboarding, and just making sure that from day one people are supported. We do have an onboarding program now, but we're not wanting to be stagnant. We want to make sure that as the work environment continues to change, that we're adapting with it and making that better and better. So like you said, students and staff can get up and running in the first weeks rather than stumbling through the first 5. So that's something I personally am working on and want to see growing. But I think just the continued emphasis that students are really not just little worker bees, but really valuable employees with innovative ideas. I think that's one of the big takeaways that I've gotten from working with BDO and our co-op program. So the more that we can invest in them and their skills, the more that we're going to get out of it in return.
Wonderful. Thank you. And with that, we are at time. So I did want to extend a quick thank you to both of you for attending and participating today and sharing your perspectives and thoughts. And for those in attendance, thank you all for attending. I hope you got some interesting information, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you so much.